Ethan hadn't planned on coming back to Willowridge. The small town held too many memories, most of them tangled up with Oliver Hayes. But life had a way of circling back, and when his company offered a transfer, he accepted. He told himself it was just practical. Better pay, slower pace, familiar surroundings. But deep down, he knew there was a part of him that had always been drawn back to this place. He didn't expect to see Oliver on his first day back. They ran into each other at the coffee shop near Main Street, the same one they used to frequent after school. Ethan had been looking at the menu when a voice, achingly familiar, said his name. "Ethan?" He turned, and there he was, Oliver, standing just a few feet away, looking like no time had passed at all. But time had passed. A decade, in fact. And in that decade they had drifted, lost contact, become two entirely different people. At least, that was what Ethan told himself. "Hey, Oliver," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the sudden weight in his chest. Oliver smiled, a small, hesitant thing. "I heard you were moving back. Didn't expect to see you this soon." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, just got in yesterday." There was a pause, one of those heavy silences where too much could be said, but neither knew where to begin. Then Oliver motioned toward the counter. "Coffee?" Ethan hesitated but nodded. "Sure." They ended up at a small corner table, the same spot they used to claim years ago. Oliver stirred his drink absent-mindedly, eyes flicking up to Ethan every few seconds. "So," Oliver finally said, "how's life?" Ethan exhaled a quiet laugh. "That's a broad question." Oliver grinned. "All right, how's the jobs?" "It's fine." Ethan took a sip of his coffee. "It brought me back here. So there's that. And you took it." Ethan glanced at him. "Yeah, I did." Oliver didn't push, but there was something in his eyes that said he wanted to. Instead, he nodded. "It's good to see you." Ethan wanted to say the same, but the words felt too simple, too easy. Seeing Oliver again was more than just good. It was unsettling in ways he hadn't prepared for. So instead, he nodded and let the silence settle. It didn't take long for news to spread. Small towns had a way of carrying whispers like the wind. By the end of the week, Ethan had already run into old acquaintances, most of whom seemed genuinely happy to see him. But Oliver was different. They saw each other again at the grocery store, then at the park where Ethan went for morning runs. Each time, there was small talk, polite conversation, but there was also something else, a thread of something unspoken between them. Then one evening, Ethan found himself standing outside a bookstore, staring at the engagement announcement taped to the window. Oliver Hayes and Daniel Whitmore, September 14th. Ethan read it once, then again. His stomach twisted in a way that felt both ridiculous and unavoidable. He shouldn't care. He had no right to care. And yet, his hands clenched at his sides as if bracing for a blow. The next time they saw each other, it was different. Oliver must have known Ethan had seen the announcement, because his usual ease was gone, replaced by a quiet tension. "You saw it," Oliver said when they met on the walking trail near the river. It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. "Yeah." Oliver hesitated, then sighed. "I was going to tell you. It just didn't come up." Ethan gave a humorless chuckle. "Didn't come up?" Oliver exhaled sharply. "Look, I don't know what you want me to say." Ethan shook his head. "Nothing. It's none of my business." Oliver looked at him then, really looked at him. "That's not true, though. Is it?" Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. There was too much history, too much weight between them. They had never said the words all those years ago, but they had both known. And now Oliver was getting married, and Ethan was standing in the middle of a trail, feeling like he was 18 again and completely lost. Oliver sighed. But Ethan shook his head. "Don't." Oliver hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Okay." And just like that, whatever had been lingering between them was packed away once more. But Ethan knew deep down that it wouldn't stay buried for long. The silence between them lingered for days. Ethan told himself he had moved past it, that he had no right to feel anything about Oliver's choices. But the truth gnawed at him in quiet moments. When he lay awake at night, when he walked past familiar places that still held echoes of their past. It wasn't until the Willowridge Summer Fair that everything finally came to a head. The fair had been a tradition for as long as Ethan could remember. He hadn't planned on going, but nostalgia had a way of pulling people in. The warm air was thick with the scent of fried food and spun sugar, the sounds of laughter and music carrying across the park. Ethan had just finished wandering through the vendor stalls when he saw Oliver. Not alone. Daniel stood beside him, speaking to a mutual friend, his hand resting easily at Oliver's back. They looked comfortable, like they belonged together. Ethan wanted to look away, to walk in the opposite direction, but Oliver turned at that moment, eyes locking onto his. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Oliver murmured something to Daniel and stepped away, weaving through the crowd until he was standing in front of Ethan. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Oliver said. Ethan shrugged. "Didn't plan to. Guess I just ended up here." Oliver's mouth lifted at the corner, but it wasn't quite a smile. "That happens a lot with you." Ethan exhaled. "Oliver, we don't have to." "Talk." Oliver interrupted. "We don't have to, but we should." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Oliver gestured for them to walk, leading them away from the noise of the main fairground to a quieter stretch near the lake. "I don't know how to do this," Oliver admitted after a moment. "I don't know how to talk to you without feeling like I'm walking a line I shouldn't be crossing." Ethan's chest tightened. "You're getting married." "I know." Oliver exhaled. "And I should be happy. Daniel is. He's good. He's steady. He's everything I should want. But..." Oliver stopped walking. He turned to face Ethan fully, something raw and unguarded in his expression. "But when I saw you standing outside that bookstore, I felt like I was seeing something I thought I'd lost forever." Ethan swallowed hard. "I thought I made peace with us a long time ago," Oliver continued. "Told myself we were just kids, that what we had was..." He shook his head. "But it wasn't nothing, was it?" Ethan looked at him, the weight of everything they had never said pressing between them. "No," he said quietly. "It wasn't nothing." Oliver let out a shaky breath. "I love him, Ethan." Ethan's stomach clenched, but he nodded. "But not the way I love you." The words hit like a slow-burning fuse, unraveling something deep inside Ethan. He didn't move, barely breathed. "I don't know what to do," Oliver admitted. "I made a promise. I told myself I was moving forward." Ethan's voice was quiet, steady. "You can still move forward, but you have to be honest with yourself about where forward really is." Oliver looked at him, something shifting in his expression. A long pause stretched between them before he exhaled a quiet, almost disbelieving laugh. "You always did know how to make things difficult." Ethan finally smiled, the smallest curve of his lips. "Not on purpose." Oliver looked out toward the lake, eyes distant, thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, lighter, freer. "I need to talk to Daniel." Oliver turned, ready to leave, but the moment he did, his steps faltered. Ethan followed his gaze, and his stomach dropped. Daniel stood just a few feet away. He had been there long enough to hear everything. For a moment, none of them moved. Oliver's face paled, his mouth opening as if to explain, to apologize. Ethan braced himself for anger, for disappointment, for anything that would make this even harder. But Daniel smiled, a small, knowing smile, sad maybe, but also relieved. He let out a quiet breath and shook his head. "You don't have to say anything, Oliver." His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I've known for a while." Oliver blinked. "What?" Daniel gave a soft chuckle. "I saw the way you looked at him, the way you tried not to look at him." His eyes flicked to Ethan, then back to Oliver. "I love you, Oliver, and I wanted to believe that was enough. But I think," he exhaled, shoulders loosening, I think I've just been holding on to someone who wasn't mine to begin with. Oliver looked stunned. Daniel, I never meant to. I know, Daniel interrupted, still smiling. You tried. You really did. He let out a breath. But love shouldn't be something you force yourself into. Oliver swallowed hard. You deserve better than this. I deserve someone who looks at me the way you look at Ethan, Daniel said simply. He reached out, squeezing Oliver's shoulder briefly. Go. Be happy. Oliver looked at him for a long moment, eyes filled with something unreadable. Then he nodded. Thank you, he said quietly. Daniel just smiled and stepped back, giving them space. And then, just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving them standing there. Oliver turned back to Ethan, something lighter in his expression now, something unburdened. Ethan felt it, too, the weight they had carried for years finally lifting. Oliver took a shaky breath, then met Ethan's gaze. I never stopped loving you. The words tumbled out, unpolished, raw. Even when I told myself it was too late. I never did. Ethan's chest tightened, his pulse loud in his ears. Then don't try any more. A slow, relieved smile spread across Oliver's face, and in that moment, everything felt right. No more what-ifs, no more unspoken words. As they walked back into the fair, the town lights glowing around them, laughter and music filling the air, Ethan knew this time was different.